The conference room smelled of lemon polish and old coffee. A breeze slipped through a window cracked open too far, rattling the blinds like restless fingers. I sat at the far end of the glossy table, beside a pitcher of ice water nobody touched. Across from me was my younger sister, Natalie Chen, 28, hair slicked back, wearing a dark suit a shade too big but obviously expensive. She kept glancing at her reflection in the blank screen of the mounted TV, adjusting her collar like she was prepping for a televised debate. Our parents sat beside her, Gloria and Peter Chen, early 60s, looking composed but carrying exhaustion in the soft lines around their eyes. Mom kept smoothing Natalie's sleeve. Dad said little, in the quiet way he always did when things slipped beyond his control. At the head of the table stood Mr. Victor Reynolds, the lawyer overseeing our grandfather's estate. He was older than both my parents, with thick silver hair and a voice like gravel softened by sympathy. He'd known Grandpa Edwin for over 40 years and joked Edwin was the only client ever to correct his legal Latin. Today, he was reading the will. Edwin Chen, my grandfather, died 3 weeks ago at 81. He'd been smart, thrifty, and mysterious with money. The kind of man who wore old sweaters yet somehow covered my entire university tuition without telling anyone. Everyone assumed the house, the savings, whatever there was, would go to Natalie. She needed it more. Or so the family story went. Victor read the legal opening in a practiced cadence. Then he dropped the sentence that sucked the oxygen from the room. To my granddaughter Natalie Chen, I leave my house on Evergreen Avenue, my 2012 Honda Accord, and the balance of my personal savings account, ending in 50739. Mom let out a sigh she'd been holding for days. Natalie beamed, looking like the universe had finally tipped in her favor. Then Victor's eyes shifted to me. To my grandson Daniel Chen. He paused. I leave $1 and my enduring love. No further words. A cousin laughed on Zoom. Or maybe Natalie. I didn't look. Mom murmured. He never needed much. No one met my eyes. Victor continued. More legal terms. Something about the backyard tool shed. I couldn't keep my mind on it. I stared at a lone silver paperclip sitting on the folder in front of me. Smooth and metallic. The kind Grandpa Edwin used to keep in neat rows in a tiny wooden box on his desk. When the meeting ended, Natalie shook Victor's hand like someone closing a business deal. Dad muttered polite thanks. Mom asked where the title papers would be sent. I got up and left before they could force awkward goodbyes. Outside, the wind had picked up. The sky was that hazy gray it turns right before rain. In my coat pocket, I still carried a thank you card Grandpa gave me half a year ago, folded so many times the ink was barely visible. Never confuse silence with absence, Daniel. Quiet people often hold the biggest truths. 3 days went by. I didn't answer texts from anyone. Not that many arrived. One from Mom, brief. Hope you're not upset. You've always been independent. That word again. On the 4th morning, I was in the kitchen, stirring oatmeal I didn't want, when my phone rang. Victor Reynolds. His name looked too official on the screen, like the call might carry more bad news. I picked up on the 3rd ring. Mr. Chen, he said first, then cleared his throat. Daniel, I was hoping you'd come by my office. There's another matter your grandfather asked me to handle privately. I didn't ask why. I let the silence stretch a second too long, then murmured, what sort of matter? Not part of the public will, he said. Your grandfather left instructions, very precise ones. It won't take long. His office felt colder than before. Same leather chairs. Same hush pressing in. Victor rose as I stepped inside, as if I were Grandpa Edwin himself. He didn't offer coffee, just motioned to a seat and softly locked the door behind us. That click of the lock made something tighten in my chest. He retrieved a small, fireproof envelope from a drawer. My name was on the front in Edwin's careful block letters. He wanted you to have this privately, Victor said, laying it down gently, and only if you came alone. I stared at it, afraid it might vanish if I blinked. Keep it almost 4 years ago, Victor added. Reviewed it each year, never changed a word. Finally, I reached for the envelope. The envelope felt heavier than I expected. "Take your time," Victor said softly, then stepped out, leaving me alone. He didn't have to say, "This changes everything." Tu hagas. The unexpected and unknown. I turned back. The quiet did that for him. I eased the seal open, careful not to tear the familiar writing. Inside was one folded sheet. Handwritten, no crossouts, no second guesses. Opened it slowly, both hands trembling like I was holding glass. "Daniel, if you're reading this, then I've already let some people down, and finally trusted the one who never asked me to." I felt my chest tighten. His voice returned to me, not thin and raspy like in his last weeks, but solid and patient, the way he'd speak over the hum of a power saw in his garage, eyes glancing at the weather outside. "You always listened when others talked over me. You knew which hinge squeaked. You learned to shape wood by touch, not only tools. I noticed that." Sunlight slipped through the blinds. I saw Grandpa's hands showing me how to smooth a plank with even strokes. He always said people rushed because they didn't trust what they were building. When I was 24, I moved to Singapore. I told the family I was consulting. What I left out was that I analyzed financial records for clients who rarely used real names. I blinked. Singapore had always been half hidden in his stories, a place of glass towers and silent ships at harbor. I learned early that people who shout often waste money, so I stayed quiet. I observed. I invested. I kept the accounts hidden. I pictured his battered workbench, the wood gouged on one side, his black ledger nobody was allowed to touch. "The account in Singapore now holds about 4.6 million. You're the sole beneficiary?" I stopped. "Let the number hover, not sink in, just float. You won't find this in the will. I kept it outside the estate for a reason. They'd say you don't need it. But I've seen you give when no one gave back. How? You fade to keep peace." I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. He'd seen me. "You were never invisible, Daniel. They just looked with the wrong eyes." At the bottom was his name, written bold and certain, Edwin Chen. I never expected a single sheet of paper to turn my entire family upside down. And if stories like mine keep you hooked, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss what happened next. Still steady, still deliberate, beneath the final line, written smaller and lighter, almost hidden. "Let this money do for others what you've always done. Quietly make room." I folded the letter back along its creases, not because I was done, but because I wasn't ready to read it again. The office stayed empty, silent, but I didn't feel alone anymore. I walked to my car, the letter gripped in my hand. Didn't slip it into my pocket, didn't fold it smaller, just held it, creased and fragile, like it might still be warm from Grandpa's hands. The sun was shining, but the sky looked pale and washed out, making everything feel far away. I got in, shut the door, and let the quiet surround me. No radio, no ignition, only air. My fingers rested on the wheel. I didn't cry. Not at first. I kept telling myself it was just a lot to absorb, that it didn't matter as much as it felt, that I was fine. But grief doesn't care about logic. It waits until your walls are lowest. It comes when there's no audience left, no one to perform strength for. I reached for my phone, found my mother's name. My thumb hovered over the green call icon. Then I lowered it again. What would I even say? That the man they believed was stingy had quietly outlived them all in wisdom? That their son, the one who always scraped by, now held more wealth than they'd ever guess? No, that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was this. They hadn't really looked at me that day. Not once. They'd stared past me, through me, around me, like I was someone they'd never needed to consider. And I'd let them. Until now. 2 weeks later, I flew to Singapore. No one knew. I didn't post pictures, didn't message anyone from the airport. It was humid when I landed, the air like wet cloth. The sky hung low and colorless, while the streets glimmered clean as hidden accounts. The building stood on a quiet lane with no sign, just a bronze plaque faintly carved, Tan and Low Associates. Inside, it smelled like leather and cool marble. Little receptionist in her early 60s, greeted me by name as soon as I stepped inside. Her smile was small but kind, the kind people give when they already know something waiting behind the next door. She led me past 2 frosted glass doors, then down a quiet hallway where the carpet showed no footprints at all. At the very end, in the final office, a man in a charcoal suit stood waiting. His glasses were tucked into the pocket of his shirt. He looked around 78, with eyes sharp as polished stone. "Mr. Chen," he said, offering his hand. "Your grandfather was truly remarkable." His name was Mr. Leonard Tan. He'd worked with Edwin Chen for almost 30 years. He didn't call him a client. He said Edwin curated money the way an artist handles paintbrushes, carefully and without ego. I took a seat in the same chair Grandpa must have sat in so many times. Mr. Tan opened a black leather folio. Inside lay crisp documents, neat handwriting, and financial records dating back to 1992. A page inside carried a simple title, "The Redwood Fund." "Named after the trees your grandfather admired," he said softly. I nodded, though I'd never known that. Edwin always respected how redwoods grew tall and strong, but did it quietly. The balance on the page looked back at me. $4,623,108.45, exact to the cent. No extra zeros left dangling. But it wasn't the number that tightened my chest. It was the list of detailed instructions beside it. Focused, deliberate, generous. Scholarships for immigrant children. Startup grants for people over 50 launching businesses. Emergency aid for caregivers supporting elderly family. Next to each clause was Edwin's clear handwriting. People like me. People like Daniel. People the world forgets. I didn't cry. Not there. But something inside me gave way. Not because I felt wealthy, but because, for once, I felt visible. Mr. Tan watched me for a long moment. He could have spent it, or kept it hidden, but he believed quiet things should be allowed to grow. He shut the folio and pushed it forward. "It's yours now, but he left you instructions, and I believe he knew you'd follow them." I stepped outside just as dusk wrapped Singapore in gold. The air smelled of rain and spice. I stood still, letter in my jacket, folio in my hand. No celebrations, no champagne. Just the quiet spark of being trusted. The invitation arrived in a group message. "Housewarming for Natalie. Come see the updates, no punctuation from my mother, just emojis and a location pin." I stared at the screen for a while and placed my phone face down on the counter. I hadn't spoken to any of them since the will reading, but something inside me knew I had to go, not to be seen, but to see. Natalie's new house was really Grandpa Edwin's old house. Same faded shutters, same creaky porch. But now there were fairy lights hanging above the steps, and a Bluetooth speaker near the door. The air smelled like cinnamon candles and frozen appetizers warmed in the oven. I walked in without knocking. Nobody noticed at first. My mother hovered by the kitchen island, carefully arranging crackers. My father was laughing at something Natalie said while holding a glass. Natalie seemed lighter now. That sort of lightness people carry when life hands them gifts they didn't earn. When my mother finally spotted me, her face shifted into polite surprise, the look people wear when they're not sure where you belong. "Daniel, you came. How's everything been?" Her voice carried an added brightness, as if to drown out something she wasn't saying. "Busy," I replied. She nodded quickly, not asking with what. Then came her usual refrain, delivered like a reflex. "You've always been so independent. I'm sure you're doing fine." I smiled. "Small." I reached into my bag and took out a framed photo. Edwin, standing in front of the Singapore office building, wearing his pale shirt and clutching his briefcase like he always did in photos. I set it gently on a side table next to a vanilla candle and real estate magazines. No one noticed at first. I said nothing. Didn't bring up the Redwood Fund, didn't explain the photo, didn't share updates. I let them believe what they wanted. And when Natalie raised a glass to toast family who believed in me, I slipped outside. The night air was cooler than I remembered. I zipped my jacket. Didn't look back. The office was modest, 2 rooms above a tailor's shop, A window that stuck during rain. Beige carpet someone tried disguising with a woven rug. But the door bore my name, Chen Redwood Financial. Chen for Edwin, Redwood for quiet strength. Though no one in my family ever used the name, they preferred simpler words. Edges they could grab onto. I never told my family about the business. Not because I was angry. There simply wasn't room in their world for what I was building, and maybe that was the point. The first person I helped was Simon, 63, newly widowed, 5 years from retirement, buried under medical debt from his late wife's illness. He cried in my office when he realized he didn't have to sell his car, said it was the first time anyone showed him a spreadsheet that made sense. The second was Anita, a former cafe worker who raised 2 daughters alone and never opened a savings account because, as she said, savings from what? We started with $40. 6 months later, she'd saved over $1,200 and felt calmer than she had since 2001. Since I didn't take photos or collect testimonials, no dramatic before and afters. This wasn't about marketing. It was about what grows quietly when no one's asking you to prove yourself. I kept Edwin's letter in my desk drawer. On days the office felt too small or progress too slow, I'd take it out and reread the final lines. Let it help those like you. Quiet souls people think aren't paying attention. It was never just about the money. It was about giving people options. Time. Dignity. A path forward that didn't require permission. One night after everyone left, I stood by the window, watching neon lights flicker below. I thought of Edwin folding his wealth into silence. How no one asked why he lived modestly. They just assumed. Maybe that's why he chose me, not because I needed help, but because I understood not wanting to be seen as needy. People think legacy has to be loud, a statue, a plaque, a hospital wing, but sometimes it's explaining a spreadsheet gently, covering a bus fare, answering a late-night call without judgment. Sometimes, legacy is the thing nobody claps for, and I'm okay with that. A year passed. The rug still curled at the corner. The window still stuck when it rained. But my wall calendar filled with names, check-ins, second chances first penciled in, then slowly inked over. On a quiet Friday, Simon came by with a thank you card and pandan cake. He smiled like someone breathing easier. He handed me a letter. It's the email I sent to cancel the collection plan, he said. Took me 3 tries, but I hit send. I nodded. Let the moment stand. At the door, he paused. Your grandfather. He must have been something. I glanced at Edwin's photo on my desk. He still is, I said. Later, alone, I read Edwin's card again. Don't ever let them mistake silence for absence, Daniel. Quiet people carry louder truths. I smiled, turned off the light, locked the door behind me. If you've ever been overlooked because people thought you didn't need help, maybe you understand. If you do, leave just one word Edwin should have heard more often. If my story echoes something in your own life, let me know below. Share your word for quiet strength, or tell me about the silent victories you've carried alone. I believe legacy isn't loud, it's the kindness no one sees. Don't wait for permission to help others. We can change more than we know.